So welcome to, I guess what you'd say the first round of our senior only podcast to get perspectives of high school seniors. Most of you that are sitting around the table are going to graduate in 2019, except for some of you that can't pass your classes. Several people raised their hand. Actually, even funnier. So the question of the day is literally what is. Well, I guess we'll start off with the question of: do you perceive or identify yourself as within the characteristics of your generation? Do you find yourselves seeing yourself in a mirror as a millennial?
Closer than Gen Z.
Okay, so
why? I don't even know half the slang terms that Gen Z uses. Like, my brother will come home and he'll say things and I'll be like, that was actually a different language. Like, are we speaking the same language? Because I didn't understand a word you just said.
But we're not millennials either.
Yeah.
Most
millennials. I feel like,
can we be the forgotten generation, just like that in between?
No.
Yeah, we're like in this weird in between. We're not technically millennials, but we're not also Gen Z.
And we did grow up with technology, but we didn't grow up with technology to the extent of having the accessibility. We grew up with technology as it was growing. So we had desktop computers that then went to laptops, that then went to iPod shuffles. We didn't automatically have the accessibility that these kids have. I didn't even have internet, actual internet, dial-up internet, until I was in 7th grade.
Right, I think Megan's right with that, where we were born into a society that had access to technology, but it wasn't mobile technology where the younger kids are, being born into and growing up in a society where mobile technology is prevalent, where you have smartphones and you can Google things, everything's at your fingertip. When we were growing up, we didn't really have that. It was more, like Megan said, desktop computers. We had cell phones, but they didn't have any sort of...
Phones, yeah, excited to take a picture.
Yeah.
We still use
iPods with the covered cameras.
Yeah.
Instead of watching Netflix all the time, we just would watch old VCRs that our parents had.
Or cassettes.
Yeah. It was the coolest thing to have a CD player and the DVD and VCR player.
Oh,
Yeah.
It's my favorite.
No, I don't know if you guys remember, but when you were in 6th grade, everybody got the iPod Touches for graduation.
I never got it.
And it was you were it.
Yeah, you were it if you had, yeah.
I remember my sister got one of the little iPod ones. They're this big, those ones. And my sister got it, and I thought it was the coolest thing, so I stole it. I listened to music, but then she got home, and I was nervous, oh my gosh, she's gonna see, so I hid it under the couch cushions, and then we found it a year later.
So what's her address so I can text her this?
No!
I can send her this podcast when we're done.
I just was oh, you must have dropped it. I don't think she knows, so I hope she doesn't listen.
Okay, so your technology immersion was different than what they perceive.
Gen Z.
Yeah,
Gen Z
and we're not millennials where we grew up with nothing, where it was just they had it while they were
Wait, say that.
I feel the 7th graders are true Gen Z because they
Yeah.
all of them have Chromebooks.
Yeah.
They're
And
always on the
iPhones.
internet.
Dude,
They're
my
always-
brother can do
That
this
was
with a
not
computer that used to be
technology
a
and education.
high-paying job.
Wasn't
almost in the
education and
six
technology
figures.
weren't
Yeah.
as hand in hand as it is today. There was definitely a separation. In elementary school, we didn't really go on computers that much, and it wasn't integrated into curriculum as it is today.
Typing. We did
Right,
typing.
right. We
did
had
typing.
typing
Yeah.
and things, but it wasn't as integrated into the everyday curriculum as it is
Oregon
now.
Trail.
Or getting the school getting a smart board was the
Right, it was a big thing.
That was in
only
5th grade. When we were in
ever.
5th grade, they got them, and all of them were wait, we don't know. It just doesn't work. And some of them still use the projectors. It was a big thing.
I remember those weird projector things.
The
where you write on
Elmos.
the plastic
Card?
stuff.
Elmo.
Elmos.
Those were cool.
I thought those were the
So-
coolest thing in the world.
So I've got another question then. So going off the technology for just a moment, because this was something that was brought up to be honest, in another podcast that we had this week, was, do you see yourself, once you finish your post-secondary education, staying with one company?
Nope. Probably
You mean
not.
one brand of technology, Apple?
No,
No.
staying with one company. In
Like
other words,
working for a company
I'm
for
going to
1
work
year.
for IBM when I'm done, or I'm going to work
Oh,
at Sears when I'm...
I don't
That's a bad
think
example,
so.
because we're out of business. Do you perceive a career at an individual corporation?
No.
Absolutely
No.
not.
No. And I think the expectation is that you move jobs frequently. Like I know one person who's, like they said, like the culture was you spend 2 years in a position and you were on to the next biggest thing.
Yeah.
It's
Now
not
it's
like
a lot
you
of
have to
like,
long-term
Well,
career.
I also
Technology,
feel
yeah.
that like with all the stuff that's going on in the news today, with corporations like leaving the country and like all that kind of
Right.
stuff, with people who've been working for 40 years at a single corporation getting completely screwed over, that really affects the mindset of like, why would I work for a company for 40 years who obviously doesn't care about
Right,
me?
and I think it's just a sign of the times that what we perceive as a career is changing. So, like careers back in the day, it was you spend 30 years at a company, you have a pension, you retire, and that's it. But now I think it's a lot more individualistic and self-driven, so you create your plan, the company doesn't create your plan.
But
So
it's
I
also
think
like
it's-
one of those things where it's a lot of like experience things. There's a lot of kids coming out of college from what I've seen, because like my cousin recently just graduated from Penn State, and his goal was not to work for a single company, but to immerse himself in the actual culture of the profession he
Right.
wanted to pursue.
So your perception of a career is now based around an industry and less around a company.
Yes.
Yes, it's more the experience than
Going from maybe
So,
group to group.
how many of you around the table look at and define your, we'll call it the American dream in terms of buying a home?
Actually, I was watching a documentary with my dad the other day about it, and it was like about in like the state of California, all of the middle class housing the middle class can no longer afford, and it's a huge problem because I would love to buy a house. I would love to raise a family, do all that stuff, but like if you don't have a good job, you cannot buy a house.
In California right now, in the Bay Area, if you make under $117,000, you qualify for low-income housing.
that's a
Yeah.
real thing.
Yeah, obviously I recently took a trip to California. I was out there for like 10 days, and I was talking to a friend of mine who technically works for the state of California's system, and that was a statistic that came across his desk that you get housing subsidies in San Francisco if you make under $117,000 a year.
And that's like
That's insane.
Is it partially maybe that number might be higher in California, partially because of social media influencers living
Yeah,
out there?
well, and it's California, so everything is
Yeah,
like
true.
stupid expensive. So
but also
Yeah.
that's probably
Like
not a
higher
great
income.
example of like America,
But
but
New Jersey,
But,
like you guys, are you guys
It's
all?
also
moving
very
out. Like,
expensive.
It's the highest property
Yeah.
tax in the country.
Yeah.
Yeah, but is that your dream? Is to buy a house? Let's assume it's not in California or New Jersey where that's prohibited by the economic state of
I
the.
think
Absolutely not, because I mean, even if you do have a stable like job and everything, anything could screw you over per se. Like you could anything that happens.
So
with the
where are you
housing
gonna
market.
live? I mean, I get
Rent a
that.
house. Rent.
So you're gonna let
That's
somebody
expensive,
else
though.
take the
money.
owner. Well, I'm just thinking the ownership of the responsibility,
Yep.
the responsibility of that home, and you are going to continually borrow.
Yes.
You're okay with that?
Yeah, because
As a-
I mean, in case something happens, a natural disaster
But, like,
again,
our
and it
whole
gets completely
generation-
ruined.
it's not on you anymore.
But I think also, if people are making money, if they have jobs that they're making into the six figures, the idea of what a home is different. Because like I know people in management consulting who travel. They have 5-day work week, and 4 of those 5 days are spent traveling. So when they buy a home, they don't buy like the sense of a home in a suburb. Instead, they're buying a condo, a $300,000 condo or $400,000 condo, 1 bedroom in the city, and in a building that has amenities like a gym and things, and it's just kind of to fit their lifestyle. So it's not like I buy a home, I get a 30-year mortgage, and that's where I'm raising my kids. It's more of I'm buying this apartment or whatever to fit my lifestyle, and if I have to move, I have to move. Because also I think
Right.
that in like today's world of global business, people are moving more.
But
So
it's
like
also like they're starting families a lot younger. Like I don't have any intention of going to college and then right out of college getting married and having a family. Like I
So
fully
they're starting their
intend-
families older,
yeah,
Yeah.
older.
not younger.
younger.
Younger would be like they're starting a
Yeah.
family at like 21 or 22.
Yeah,
you guys,
yeah,
we do
otherwise-
in
that.
general, your generation is we're starting a family at 30.
Well,
Yeah.
I know my
Or,
cousin.
We're
She's a
pursuing a
millennial.
career.
She's 35 and she's having her first child. Like that's
Yeah.
like
Yeah, that's, like,
considered
normal.
late.
But
Yeah.
that's, like,
That's
common
a
now.
normal thing now.
Like, because a lot of people want to establish themselves, figure out their career path, definitely establish themselves as like their own individual person, and then find somebody else with the same ambition, the same tendencies, and just kind of
Same economics.
Well, I mean, it always
not even that.
Be
Really
able to
interesting
stand on your
for
own
like
feet.
from a biological
Having to rely
standpoint, only because if you are 35 years or older, you're automatically considered a high risk pregnancy.
Yeah. No, but what I think is, but I think it also leads back to, you want to be able to provide for your child, and
Yeah.
people aren't making enough money, so
Right.
it takes them that long
Right.
to get established and get a money and have a
Interesting
house.
perception. It's,
I
like,
I don't
it's obviously way different than my generation. but
I
I'm-
don't want to have
you know.
kids unless I can afford them.
Right.
Yeah.
I
Right.
don't- but
And
not
I
even
They're
think that's a
expensive.
common
Y'all are
knowledge.
expensive.
Kids are like $1 million to raise them.
Yo, got your pause.
Y'all are
even, like,
expensive.
cost
Yeah.
aspect of children, but like I don't want my kids to be in an emotionally or mentally unstable environment because like a lot of younger marriages tend to be a lot more unstable and a lot more sporadic.
Where are these statistics coming from?
Well, like,
Is this-
I'm just basing this off of my family and the people that I've seen in
Okay.
my life, and like the younger you have the kids, the less mature you are, the less you've seen, the less you know. So as your kids are growing up, you're
Kind of figuring it out.
So we should have
Yeah.
kids at 60.
no, but like
Then you're too old for anything.
yeah, that's a little.
Thanks, Harrison Ford.
But it's just like
Too old for anything.
You just gotta like.
Well, if you have like a
What?
toddler,
What?
If you have a kid at 60, you're like first. If
You have a very high propensity of Down syndrome.
yeah, could you also imagine having being
Or higher, I should say. Not very high. You have a higher.
Could you imagine being 60 years old and having to try to
Chasing a
take care of
toddler?
and like have a toddler?
Oh,
the
no.
temper tantrums. You're gonna be 60 and be like, no.
I would have difficulty imagining
Yeah.
now. and
Because how old's your youngest now?
so she is 6.
Yeah, so
See?
I love
I have a 6 and an 8-year-old, and even that
Is a lot.
A lot. And they're at that age relatively like I don't have to constantly monitor them. I can say you can go play in the playroom or go out front and ride
Yeah.
bikes, and they can do that
yeah.
by following the general rules. So, so all right. So housing is out. Not long-term work for an individual company. So it sounds like most of you around the table at least relatively identify with those characteristics of millennials. So a question that came up, and actually it was a conversation that we brought up in physics, was, do you feel what has been described as an immense pressure to attend a college or university versus going into other career paths?
Yes.
Yes.
Definitely.
Because I know with my parents, they were like, when they were growing up, because my dad was born in 61, so they're like, the higher education you have, the more money you're going to make, which is true, but it's just like, education costs so much money.
Well, not even that though. Depending on what degree you get, there's like different studies that go out all the time now that certain degrees you will not get the return on what you spent on your education. You'll just never you won't be able to pay off your student loans now. And if you go like certain like trades, if you go into plumbing and like electricity and like all that kind of stuff, you can actually make a good living.
There's
But
such a
there's just,
high-
like,
Yeah, we actually did a
stereotypes.
podcast yesterday with the gentleman that represents Universal Technical Institute, which is a post-secondary education that does mechanics, welding. Has a lot of. It's a tech school.
Yeah.
For after high school, and they're looking at starting salaries of $55,000 a year. After 2 or 3 years, $75,000 to $80,000.
Yeah, that's like,
My cousin is.
Yeah.
He went to Warren Tech. He is now a welder. He works at a company. He gets paid $28 an hour on a regular weekday, and if you work Sundays, you get paid 48 hours or $48 an hour. And that's actually for a 19-year-old. That's an amazing job. If he actually saves up all of his money, then he can he could go and get his own place and do all these other things and actually afford things.
Now, is he looking to buy a house?
Not yet, no, God.
because it's like,
This is it just.
how's this?
From somebody who not only taught financial literacy, but I worked at a bank for many years, and I just some of the things that the millennials, like your generation, looks at in terms of finances, I'm never gonna say it's right or wrong because I think that that's a value statement. It just is literally the polar opposite of what advice would normally be given.
Like, wouldn't you want to have a house to live in? Because I think
I'll give you an example. My wife and I, before we were married, figured out that there was the two rents we had. That our two rents together were going to be more than the mortgage for the house. So we moved in together, knowing like full well that we may not necessarily stay together, but that we were building an equity in an investment, instead of giving it to somebody else who took the responsibility. Like,
Right.
so it's a different. Again, I don't want to ever put a value statement on it that it's right or wrong. I want to say that there's different viewpoints of how your finances move. Because the other last, we'll wrap it up. But this last characteristic that's been applied to millennials in a lot of cases is that you do not. You perceive the accrual of debt as probably one of the worst things, and you do that because you lived a good portion of your growing up lives between 2006, 2007 era until now. So like from the time that in a lot of your cases you were 6-7 years old until now you're graduating high school, you lived in a depression.
Well, you look at, like, I know, like, now you look back and, like, a bunch of our friends, like, they lost their house. Like, I know.
Yeah.
It's
Like,
it's not. It was like, and then everybody was afraid to buy houses for a really long time, and I feel like that reflects on the people that were like in college at the time, which is mainly like millennials. Like, they were in college during the recession, and now they're coming out and they were told to, like, you have to buy a house, you have to have kids, you have to do this, and I feel like I
they
wouldn't.
still, you have people that are like 40 years old and still haven't paid off their student loans. You haven't paid off your student loans?
No.
It's
That's
so much
terrifying.
money.
Isn't it like common though? Like a lot
Well,
of,
but
like,
remember, I went back and I have like
Still terrifying.
That was accrued by the fact that I am now. I will have halfway through, well, 3/4 of the way through my math master's. I went through another master's degree program that I stopped and decided not to do, and now I have in 2019 I'll finish a master's degree in curriculum instruction. So that's a lot of extra education. I enjoy going to school.
But like a lot of people still like have finished their degrees or working a job, but the interest on those loans, because certain loans are just basically made so you can never really pay them off.
those
Like
are
you're
the
gonna pay
personal
off.
loans.
Yeah, personal loans can be, it depends on, what you really need to always focus on, and of course this is a whole entirely different topic, is to make sure that it's something that we can
But that's like
you
something
can
we
manage. So we actually have a podcast about that if you're really interested
But
in
like
talking about
growing
that.
up in all of that, like seeing people not being able to pay off their student loans, watching your friends at like 8 years old, then coming into school upset because their house is
and
getting kicked
and
out of their
as
house.
a child not understanding really what's going on.
It's also
Right.
very strange because, like, even going back to the technology thing, like, none of us know how to balance a checkbook because our parents just, like, stopped using it. Everything's done online now, so we're missing.
What's a checkbook?
Exactly.
No, my
And,
mom taught me how to write a check
Is
the
that
other
the
day.
thing
I
that
was
you
like,
chisel into rock? I mean,
Exactly. Like, we didn't learn, like, basic, like, the whole college loan situation is, like, we have financial aid and we learn about it, but a lot of things were expected to be common knowledge coming from, like, our parents and growing up, like, their parents taught them that, and we're not learning it, and then we're getting penalized for it when we go into college 17 years old in some cases, not having a clue what to do about finances or how to manage the influx of how much we're paying each month, if we need a job, what kind of job, what's going to aid us, what's going to be too much, and it becomes benefits. It becomes an overwhelming amount for a kid that's never dealt with it before, because a lot of us are, I'm going to be that person, and I'm going to say a lot of us are entitled. Like, a lot of us do not realize what it is to work. I mean, not us specifically, but like
it's
as a
force
whole.
times
Yeah.
distance parallel to the force.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's the work.
That's what we did in physics today. So that's always. So awesome. I mean, that's really good insight to what your perception of millennials is. So I think next time we'll have a different topic, and everybody say goodbye.
bye.